Christian parenting.
Understanding our own finances is hard enough, let alone knowing how to teach our children. The Family and Finances podcast hopes to take you from a place of stress, worry, and tension to a place of freedom, peace, and unity. If you're looking for peace of mind, contentment, and confidence in dealing with your finances, this is the podcast for you. Well, welcome to the podcast, Dan. It's always good to be with you.
Great to be here.
We always talk about stories of failure and success, and today is an area where many people fail. It's the topic of marital unity, financial unity, and really how to get together on managing your money.
Yes, it's a big deal. And for us, I was delighted to put my money with yours because you had more than me. So
It wasn't
for
much.
the first time, we had a pretty good sized checking account for a while.
Our standards were pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, this is not an area where we struggled in a sense. We never lied to each other.
No.
And that's considered financial infidelity. And it's almost on par with sexual infidelity in terms of how much pain it causes, how often that it happens today. We get a lot of calls from people who are in crisis in their relationship because somebody was lying about the finances.
Right. I'll never forget the young couple that came to you for counseling.
Well, I won't forget it either because one of my friends who had performed their wedding called me and asked me to help this couple with their marriage. He sent them over to me, and it was a disaster. I don't know why he even performed the marriage because they were in such distress. This young couple, I'll just tell a little bit of the story. You may fill in some of the detail, but they had only been married 6 months. And when they sat down in front of me, they couldn't talk to each other because she had discovered that, unbeknownst to her, he had purchased the engagement ring, the wedding ring, all the wedding expenses, all the honeymoon expenses, all the furniture they bought, everything they had done in the first 6 months of their marriage was on a credit card.
But you'd never know they had an issue. Remember, describe how he came into the meeting.
Well, they both were living like they were affluent. They both had new cars. I think he had a BMW. They just bought a home in the best part of town. What we found out is he had borrowed money from her father to buy the home. And then she didn't know he had a terrible credit score. She didn't know that he was actually cheating on his expense accounts at work just to pay some of their credit cards. And he got caught doing that. And he got fired. So he had no income, all this debt, and it was all news to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she no longer trusted him.
Yeah.
She was livid.
I can't blame her.
Well, yeah, you would have been too. And so this pastor wants me to sort this all out. And unfortunately, I couldn't even get them to forgive each other and to start over rebuilding. For her, it was just done. And, he owed so much money. And one other interesting thing I remember, they had never talked about their credit score. She didn't know. He also had massive student loans. He got his master's degree with a student loan. That's where they met in grad school. And there was no indication from her point of view that he had any kind of issues with money. But he couldn't manage it at all. And unfortunately, that marriage didn't work. To the best of my knowledge, they were never able to overcome that. Now, let me flip it over and to give people hope. I had a call on the radio one day of a lady who said to me, I need help avoiding foreclosure. And I remember asking her, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, because all she wanted to know was, what number to call and who to talk to save her house. And she said, well, I'm married, but my husband has moved out. I have a little 4-year-old, and I'm pregnant with twins. I said, well, what will happen if you get foreclosed on? She said, I'll be homeless. And I said, well, what happened to your husband? And it turns out we decided to talk offline. Because for me, it was no longer, some radio show. This was a real life. And so I took the call offline and found out her husband had been deployed. And soldiers go through enormous financial stress. When he left, and he had been gone about a year, their finances were in good shape. She told me they were in great shape. When he came back, they were in terrible shape. He had turned it over to her, and she had made a lot of mistakes. So suddenly they were upside down, and he got angry about that. She got angry that he was angry. He moved out, and without his income, she couldn't pay any bills. And so what we were about to see was not only a divorce, we were going to see a divorce, 2 bankruptcies, a single mother, and a homeless single mother with twins on the way. And I remember saying, "Could I talk to your husband about this?" And she said, "He won't talk to anybody. He's gone." And you know the rest of the story. I convinced her to get him to come to a conference call. And we just started talking about forgiveness and reconciliation and unity and love and respect. Long story short, after an hour of dead silence, which they had to listen to me talk the whole time because they wouldn't talk to each other or to me, I said, "Would you come back for another call?" And the second call, when we called in the 800 number, she said, "Hello, Mr. Bentley." I said, "Hello. Is your husband going to call in today?" Because he was calling in from a different location. And he said, "No, sir, I'm not. I'm here at home. We've been reconciled." And they put it back together.
Right.
So what happens so often, Ann, is that couples start hiding decisions from each other. And they start not wanting the other one to know what they're doing.
And why is that? It's deeper than just hiding the money. There's insecurity, there's fear, there's embarrassment, greed.
Well, don't you think sometimes they've just never been taught how to get on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
And as one of our staff members said, as young couples marry later in life, they're used to doing it on their own.
Yeah.
And so they never have this sort of melding. And I think the data shows recently that millennials are more likely to, or there's a higher percentage of millennials who are keeping their bank accounts separate, which we believe creates an opportunity for this kind of division and problem to arise.
Your money, my money mentality.
Yeah. So let's go through some things to help couples get unified.
Okay.
We've told them sort of the bad side of it. To me, the upside of it is phenomenal when you get on the same page and when you really do get unified. So we believe in having unified checking accounts, all of our accounts. So why don't you go through sort of how we do that?
Well, you have your money deposited into a checking account, and then I put some of it in savings and pay bills, and we have one credit card, we have savings account, we have multiple accounts, but
we both have access to them.
Yeah, they're joint.
Yeah, so
everything's joint.
We can look at them at any time. We both know all the transactions, and we talk about those transactions. You know exactly if I've gone off and made a purchase without talking to you about it because you see it.
Right.
And what we realize is instead of me being on the defensive and not wanting to come home and have to explain myself, we just talk about it in advance. And so one of the ways that we've learned to get unified is to our threshold. What do you think it is? I think it's around $200, $250. If we're going to spend some money. For you, it's even lower.
Yeah. If I need a new pair of tennis shoes, I'll ask you if I can get some.
Yeah. And
or if I notice you need some, I'm on the lookout for some that are on sale.
And so, but that's a constant dialogue. And we agree on how we're going to spend the money.
And even invest.
Well, it goes all the way through.
Yes.
We agree on our budget. We agree when we're going to spend money over $200, or we talk about it.
Right.
And we don't hide that from each other. But I agree with you, and people start to hide it usually when there's a problem. What I've seen in men is they get under financial stress, and they don't want their wife to know and to feel that stress. So they start to do things that they hope will recover. And I've actually seen them gamble on the side simply to try to provide for their family.
Well, and then on the other side, I've known women who will open an account at stores so they can shop.
And they don't want to tell their husband what they're buying.
Right.
I've seen that as well. Now, we've never done that with each other.
Mm-mm.
And I think part of it comes down to coming to appreciate what the other one brings in terms of helping to make the finances better. You are so good with being frugal, which, as everybody knows, I don't like that, but you're good at it. And so I let you be frugal, and it helps me be frugal. I would never be frugal.
We just don't want to take the time.
No,
You don't have the time.
it's a waste of time to me to be frugal. But I've learned you do it sort of naturally,
Mm-hmm.
and it saves me time and it saves us money. So we're unified in that I like that you have a foot on the brake. I always want to put a foot on the gas. But by talking about it, we become unified because we need both of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to have just one credit card as well. Because before, what did we have in the past? 10? Did we ever get up
You
to 10?
always say that. I don't think we had that many. Maybe we did.
6? It was
we
a
had
lot.
multiple, but
And part of it was I kind of had my credit cards and you had yours. And then we'd look at the bills and go, oh my goodness, what have we done to ourselves? I mean, you never hardly spent anything on yours, but
well,
I would run mine up and then want to use yours. But they were always joint accounts. They weren't in my name or your name. And so our credit score was tied together. In other words, if we weren't talking about this, our credit score was going to suffer mutually. We always borrowed money jointly when we would make a loan, and we always knew that our credit scores would be mutually impacted, so we had to do this better. I think having one credit card simplified our life.
having everything unified simplified it, I thought, from the very beginning.
Yeah, we started out that way.
Yeah.
But then we got rid of all those credit cards and went down to one. And then ultimately, we now talk mostly about investing, and we have to agree on that.
And giving.
Well, yes, and our giving. So to me, the first step in getting unified is to put everything together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no hiding and there's no temptation. And you just have to be vulnerable. And you have to agree that you're a pliable, moldable person. A lot of guys are just stubborn. Like they just want their way. I mean, that's what the Bible says causes fights and quarrels is you want your own way. And when you say, we're going to do this together, you have to give up on some of your stubbornness.
Well, I was just blessed to hear what one couple's doing on staff. He puts his money in the checking account and hers goes directly into their savings account. I just think that's beautiful to start off a marriage like that.
Well, and it doesn't mean that your accounts have to be joint. It just means you need mutual access.
Mm-hmm. Well, theirs are joint.
But even if she had one or he had one, it's okay as long as you can both see each other's. I can see where somebody has an account that it's tied to their work and the money's going directly there. That's not the issue. It's not necessarily the technical part of it. It's the spirit of it that we're both going to be transparent. I think secondly, it's really important that we don't get into the idea that it's her money or his money. I get asked that all the time. I get asked, well, it's, we disagree on what we're going to do with her money. Well, how did we resolve that? You remember?
I didn't have any money. I don't know. I don't remember.
We agree it was God's money.
Oh, that's true.
And if it's God's money, then we stop talking about you had a job and you put money in the bank. And so when it became God's money, we quit looking at it as I have to talk to you about what I want to do with yours. And if it's God's money, then we managed it jointly.
Well, I think our whole mindset was we became one in everything.
Right. Two shall become one. And I think by trusting each other with our finances, that helps you. So you're one completely. There's nothing held back. Another thing that helped us to stop being divided is when we disagreed, which was often, we learned to ask each other why, like what was behind that, so that we got into the issues of not just the mechanics of the money we're going to move $20 here or $50 there. But we would start to explain our philosophy. Why do we want to do that? So, for instance, I'm going to give an example on you, and maybe you can think of one of me. But you like to say no when I want to buy stuff. And sometimes I would not understand why. And I'm not saying all the time, but when you would say no, let me be softer
Okay.
about that. When you would say no, I could tell you didn't like that. When you would say no, I I I thought sometimes it was just because you just didn't want to spend the money and weren't, thinking how bad I wanted it. What I found out is that your philosophy was you prefer to save for the future instead of spend everything right now.
Hmm.
And that taught me to start to think that way as well. If I hadn't have asked you, it would have just been an irritation. But when I realized it was a bigger reason, it was a bigger purpose, that allowed us to start thinking the same way.
Well, and then working within the parameters of a budget. I didn't mind if you wanted something, but could you wait just 1 week? Put us over to the next paycheck.
Well,
Or
and then you would say, you may not want it in a week, and maybe you'll forget about it by then. And sometimes I would,
Mhm.
and that worked. And then when it came to giving, we agreed philosophically that the Bible said it's better to give than to receive, so we would make giving our top priority. What that did for us is we quit just asking each other, do you want to give? We quit asking each other, should we give? We quit asking each other, you know, the question, creating that tension in our marriage. And it became how much
Right.
and when.
So we'd each come up with a number. We'd, ask the Lord how much we should give. And 90% of the time, we had the same number.
Yeah, we would be in agreement on that. I would tell you, I get a lot of questions from couples where this is the big divider, especially when they're not both Christians.
Mhm.
And more often than not, the wife writes and says, I'm the Christian in the family. I want to tithe. I've got my own income. My husband says no. What do I do? And I always give them the advice that they should not tithe until their husband agrees. And ask the husband what he would agree to in some amount if she wants to start giving. And I've seen it a couple of times, Anne, where the husband comes back and says, well, if you're asking me, here's what I would do. And he starts to appreciate the idea that he's included in that decision. Now, sometimes they say, no, I'm not going to do it. But I think it's more important to preserve the relationship than for her to treat that money like her own and just start giving. I think God understands that tension.
It's that crazy cycle. She's got to honor him first, honor her husband.
Right.
You know?
We've seen when a woman honors her husband's opinion. And by the way, that idea of being respected, a man loves to be asked his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
When we're asked our opinion, we are much more flexible than when we're told what to do.
Right.
Or when we're corrected or criticized. That's when we tend to resist. And that breaks unity in the relationship.
And we've seen that multiple times in couples we've known who have divorced.
Yes.
Where a woman absolutely will not give her husband the respect he deserves.
Yeah, I've had a friend that they were successful financially, but he will tell you that he got corrected so often that it wore him out emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And their marriage didn't survive that. From constant correction, whatever decision he made, he would be corrected. And I think that's one of the reasons that this issue is so important, because you can criticize each other over your financial decisions almost every day over something. I'm terrible about shopping for groceries from the standpoint of you ask me 4 things, and when I come home, it's either wasn't on sale, it's not the brand that we normally buy, it's salted or unsalted butter. I'm still not sure which one of those I'm supposed to get. And there's stuff to criticize me for.
But I'm trying not to do that.
No,
as
you're not.
much.
You're not. But it's what I'm saying is it's easy to do every day, and we
Right.
have to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, we began to appreciate our differences, and now we're becoming more like each other. Where we used to be so dramatically opposite, it's funny to me now to think about how blended we are, like today. Tell us what happened today at lunch.
Well, I'm trying to think.
You
We,
just read an article about people that were working in the food business.
oh, yeah. We had an older waitress, and I said, we need to give her a good tip.
And we were
I said,
almost exactly in
yeah.
agreement on how much to do it and
Mm-hmm.
took joy in it.
Mm-hmm. Giving her much more than she would have expected.
Yeah, almost more than our lunch cost. And I thought, wouldn't that fun? And
Mm-hmm.
we were both thinking kind of the same thing. And the two are becoming more like one. And it's been such a blessing to stay unified and to be in that path where God's word has brought two complete opposites together in unity.
So, Chuck, suppose that I want to come clean. Okay? I'm scared. I've had this hidden debt for a while, but the Lord's convicted me, and I want to come clean. What should I do?
Well, I've actually seen an example of that was so remarkable that it made national news. And Russ and Candy Hildebrandt became friends of mine through that experience. But one day she asked her husband, "What's wrong with you?" And she had never seen him so depressed and down, and she knew something was wrong with him. And he didn't want to talk about it. But she said, "Look, I know something is wrong, and it's time you can tell me whatever it is." And she set the stage of love and acceptance, which is so important in any relationship, to hear what he had to say. And he said, "Well, Candy, I have $60,000 in debt that you don't know about." And that was equivalent to 100% of their income. And she nearly passed out. But she remembers her next words. "Okay, let's work together to resolve that."
Mm-hmm.
And he could not believe it. He thought if he ever told her that the marriage would be over because he had deceived her for so long and had tried so hard. And what was interesting is his motivation was to help the family. He was trying to make money through some investments that had gone south. And he just didn't want to tell her how much he had lost. So he kept doubling down, doubling down, doubling down. And she said there was a Holy Spirit moment when everything in her felt betrayed. Everything. But God gave her the presence of mind to not one time criticize or condemn him for it, or scream or yell or walk out the door. And that moment turned the whole situation around. He was now transparent and free from the hidden life he had, and they were now working together. Their worst nightmare became their greatest victory. And I think sometimes we forget that's an opportunity that God gives us. When we were talking earlier about respect, she showed him respect, but he also responded back to her in gratitude for her love.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved her in return and said, "Thank you. And let's start working together." The interesting story, the rest of that story, is they paid off all of that debt without getting any debt forgiveness, without foregoing any interest payments. They never stopped tithing during that time. And they had a surprise baby along the way and got it all paid back. An amazing story.
Well, just thinking about Russ, guilt is magnified by our accuser too. And when we feel guilty, we will do all kinds of things that are not right to try to cover that. And, Satan will do what he can to make us feel even worse.
Well, infections grow in the dark, and they're cleansed in the sunshine. And when we get things out in the light, that's when the healing begins. But it's so frightening. It takes a great deal of humility. I think setting the stage for vulnerability is setting the stage for acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
If you give a signal to your spouse, I will accept whatever I hear from you, then we can be vulnerable with each other. But if we know we're going to get attacked or condemned, we're going to hold that inside and we're going to wait for an opportunity for the healing to begin.
So, can you address community property? We've got several states that have those community property laws.
Well, I think when we marry, everything should be considered community property, meaning what's mine is yours and yours is mine. I think that's what the Bible means when two become one. And I've seen people try to do it differently, and I've seen them do prenuptial agreements. I've seen them try to keep everything totally separate. And in reality, if you never go all in and say what's mine is yours and yours is mine, then you haven't built the trust that the marriage needs to survive long term. And so it doesn't help you to try to keep the property separate. It only raises more suspicions and more complexities. I've known couples who've done that. I've seen them go at it for a long, long time, but ultimately you need to trust each other. The Bible says in Colossians 2:8, do not be careful not to be deceived by a philosophy that depends upon the traditions of the world. And, I've seen couples say, well, we'll just live together. We'll be better off financially. And that's actually proven statistically wrong. You're better off financially to be married than to live together. And couples who do unify make far greater progress financially than couples who never unify their finances.
One thing that I have seen is very important is that husbands and wives know the passwords, know all the banking information, because I've had several people who have lost spouses suddenly, and the ones left behind didn't know where anything was. Some of these women didn't have a clue how much money they even had.
Well, people listening could make the argument, well, we've never melded our accounts together and it works fine for them. That's true. The mechanics can work okay if you have totally separate accounts. Usually, you have to be pretty good with your budgeting and your tracking. But in every case, I think you should exchange passwords and have complete transparency, so that not only in the event of death, but in the event that somebody just needs access. There are times when I'll go into our accounts and look at them just to see where we are, and you do the same thing.
Well, and in today's COVID world, people get sick. Somebody's got to pay the bills or make sure that there's money in the account to cover the bills.
Right. And
so it's important.
Yeah, we keep our passwords known in known locations where both of us can find them.
So, Chuck, you mentioned that we have become more like-minded the longer we've been married. And I think that's because the more we're in the Word, the more that we have been taught by the Lord, the closer we've grown together. The closer we get to Christ, the closer we come together.
Well, I think that's true, Ann. I look at marriage I think the illustration that's my favorite is looking at marriage like tea being seeped into water. And when that tea bag goes, it's totally different than the water. But when it's seeped in the water, then the water becomes what the content of the tea bag is. And it's inseparable. And I look at our lives as two very different flavors of tea, and we were trying to bring it together. And then God brought us into unity through His Word. And now those flavors are blended into a unique flavor. Two have become one. We're now God's unique creation as man and wife. And we're similar in so many ways. We like the same things. We enjoy each other more. And it's sort of miraculous when we look back on how God did that. But I agree with you. Apart from the Word, that would not have happened. We still would have been sort of externally trying to become alike. On the surface, but it's been more internal now. And I would say to the couple who's struggling and they're not there and they want to be there, really spend time discussing your philosophies. Really look for ways that you can agree on finances outside your own opinion. What does God say about them? Can we agree on a standard other than our own that is our guideline in all things? That way, when there's a dispute, we can go back to the guidelines. And then I think third, go ahead and trust each other fully. And there's a trust in God when you say that in my marriage, I'm going to be completely vulnerable. Emotionally, I'm going to be vulnerable financially. I'm going to trust God to work this all out. And that trust is what builds the glue. And I think, Ann, it's what adds so much joy. I trust you today with everything. And that's comforting to me. It ends any idea that I'm in the world alone. I'm not alone anymore. I have you, and we have each other. And that brings such great joy. And that's why, to me, it's so much greater than the money. It's getting down to the very core of an intimate marriage where everything is fully transparent and there's absolute trust.
And I would add, Chuck, that we pray together in the morning and in the evening. So couples need to invite the Lord into their marriage and to seek His wisdom and His counsel, as well as a wise mentor. If they really need help, don't be afraid to ask someone else to help them.
Well, thank you, Ann. It's been a great journey. You know, we started out telling about all of our failures as honestly as we could. And I hope today people sense that there's a deep joy and satisfaction in being united as one.
Mm-hmm. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Ann.